manufacturing, and to the extent possible, I'll cover the metal additive manufacturing. It's a fact that for nearly 15 plus years, between 1998 to 2004 or 5, I was very closely associated with two plastic EM technologies like stereolithography and fused deposition modeling. Now it's called as fused filament fabrication. But in recent times, most of my primary additive manufacturing work is connected with the metallic materials. So whatever I have shown on the right side as a vertical column of parts, they were all additive manufactured in India corresponding to aeronautical programs, the defense programs, and other missionary projects, mission mode projects of industries and DRDO in the recent times. So what is that I'm going to do in today's presentation is give a small uh, overview of the functionalities of the additive manufacturing processes connected with the polymers, metallic materials, and some ceramics. I'll explain a few case studies connected with industrial context and strategic context, and establish the need for design for additive manufacturing. See, however mature the technology could be, and whatever may be the potential in terms of compressing the product design and development cycle by using this technology, it's imperative that you need to design the part to take greater advantage of the process. So the design for additive manufacturing is an activity which assumes primacy in this kind of a context. So I'll talk about that. And uh, finally, I'll conclude by describing what are the opportunities that exist in contemporary framework for industrial institutions, research laboratories, and academia um, to work together in terms of advancing this technology and expanding the horizon of applications. I'm sure you have been formally introduced to the 7 categories of additive manufacturing, encompassing polymerization, material jetting, extrusion. So primarily these three technologies are associated with plastics. But when it comes to metallic materials, the ones that you think about are pod bed fusion, sheet lamination, binder jetting in the recent times, and of course, a very versatile technology called direct energy deposition. These 7 categories have been enunciated in the way that I have displayed in the slide by ASTM or ISO collaborative effort. And in these 7 technologies, I have had an occasion to, or rather an opportunity to work very closely with VAT polymerization, um, material extrusion, binder jetting, and pod bed fusion. So this is what I'm going to share in today's presentation. The kind of applications that have emerged in the contemporary scenario are dominant in context relevant to defense, space research, aeronautical research, and transportation sector, which is more or less connected with the automotive companies. But it's important to note that in recent times, we have also seen significant number of applications connected with healthcare and oil and gas. In healthcare sector, because of the necessity for designing and developing the products in a limited time, commensurate with the expectations of the healthcare authorities. And in oil and gas, because of the emphasis on digitizing the spare part repositories and creating new supply chain configurations for delivery of the spare parts just in time at the point of contact by drawing the data from digital libraries. So I'll try and capture some of these things in my today's presentation. So one of the very important additive manufacturing applications which has captured the imagination of many user groups in India, in which we were directly connected, was the one pertinent to the design and development of a feed cluster, a transponder for a communication satellite. In June 2017, this particular part, which you see as the insect part, became the India's first metal 3D printed part, which was directly used in the space mission. It was launched into the orbit with a mission life of almost 10 years. And it has completed almost like 4 years plus of operations in an orbit with an apogee altitude of almost like 35,000 kilometers. We are seeing more and more applications of this kind. About a year ago, I happened to see the Hyderabad-based Skyroot Aerospace, which worked with Wipro to create the first bipropellant liquid rocket engine injector, which you see on the right side, made out of aluminum alloy called ALSI 10 mg, and it underwent successfully trials in the upper stage rocket engine. And in this specific case, industrial case study, the most important point for the users to note is the overall mass of the part was reduced by about half, and the lead time for manufacturing was reduced by almost 80% because of the aspect of monolithizing of multiple components into a single component in case of this liquid rocket engine injector. And we have had an opportunity to work with multiple groups from IIT Bombay, VIT Vellore, SIT Tumkur, wherein the students came to Wipro 3D with an intention of um, re-engineering a component called steering upright, which you can see here. It's a very important component of the vehicle dynamics used in the Formula E cars. So we worked in tandem with the student teams for topology optimization, weight reduction, and successful induction into the Formula cars within the stipulated time of about 3.5 months. And important thing in this case was we were able to cut down the weight significantly without compromising on the strength and stiffness criteria that are paramount for the operation of the steering knuckle. So with all these uh, case studies, it might be apparent that in the recent times, there is a paradigm shift in the application profile of the part. The initial set of additive manufactured or 3D printed parts were largely used in the prototyping or a tooling kind of a context. But in recent times, you have seen that the parts are able to meet the end use requirement. They're able to withstand the forces, temperatures, pressures, and deformations that are synonymous with the service application. And hence, there is more and more tendency on the part of the AM practitioners to look at AM parts as the parts for end use context or service context. So it's very important for us to recognize the fact that additive manufacturing is no longer limited to manufacturing. It is becoming an interplay of design, materials, laser physics, polymer chemistry, software engineering, control engineering, testing, quality, certification, and also simulation. So it's truly multidisciplinary now in the way it is practiced in the industries. And its versatility can be accentuated by the fact that the applications are enough and enlarging in multivariate contexts connected with the defense, aeronautics, medical, energy sector, tooling sector, electronic sector, avionics sector. So these kind of emerging applications are to some extent facilitated by the larger number of material options which are emerging in the context of additive manufacturing. They consist of thermoplastic materials, metallic materials, ceramics, and also high performance composites. So as mentioned briefly, we have had an occasion to work very closely with the team of ISRO and to develop an important part called feed cluster for the communication satellite GSAT 19. And this was put into orbit in the year June 2000, in the month June 2017. And if I have to capture the important features of this particular application connected with metal additive manufacturing, you can see here this feed cluster, which I briefly mentioned as the transponder of a communication satellite, originally was made out of 17 different parts in conventional manufacturing. So what we did was converted these 17 different parts into a single part. This is called unibody configuration or monolithic configuration. In the bargain, we were able to cut down the weight of the module or part significantly, and we were also able to ensure that RF performance of this particular part significantly improves compared to the conventionally manufactured part, because of the fact that conventional parts had to use a lot of fasteners and welding to as a part of the assembly procedure, whereas additive manufactured part was devoid of those features. And this part, the development of this part took only about 2.5 to 3 months. But if you see the testing of the part, that took more than a year, because we had to evaluate not only the strength, hardness, wear resistance, corrosion resistance, the endurance of the part, but also the communication satellite teams had to develop confidence in its RF correct characteristics, including the insertion and return losses, the transmission and reflection coefficients, the standard radiation pattern associated with the additive manufactured part. And they had to gain confidence that this particular part provides a similar kind of RF performance as that of conventional manufactured part. So with all these confirmation in place, the additive manufactured part was launched as a part of the GSAT launch in June 2017. And it has completed, as I mentioned, more than 4 years of the intended 10 years of mission life. Originally, this part was getting made out of 6061 aluminum alloy. If you look at the dimensions of the part, it's about 320 mm along the largest linear dimension. These four different horns were getting manufactured out of CNC turning, laser cutting, and they were joined together through TIG welding. If you can visualize, each of these four horns represents one region in the country: north, south, east, west. When it is part of the communication satellite, you can imagine that each horn will be responsible for communication linking of a region, a specified stipulated region of the country. So all of them have to maintain the positional accuracy with reference to each other with, in other words, the positional accuracy of each of the horns with reference to each other is vital for ensuring the performance of the part. So, and if there are any weldings which are suboptimally done, those of you who are connected with electronics would be knowing that it leads to RF leakages, and also the alignment has to be perfectly done with reference to each other. Otherwise, you spend a lot more time in developing the assembly fixtures rather than manufacturing the part. So what we did in this case was, instead of making these four components together and then trying to join, we converted entire part into a monolithic configuration. And here I would like to take a detour and spend some time on the topic of design for additive manufacturing and importance of the support structures. So in the next slide, in this slide, you can see that on the left side, you can see this monolithic configuration. Now, if this part were to be built in the same way, what happens is you end up with support structures that are shown in the blue color in the third picture to the right. And the blue color support structures, from the blue color support structures, you can easily infer that the volume of the support structures is more than 300% compared to the part itself. So obviously, it's not a desirable scenario because there are so many overhangs in the platform and you need to spend so much of effort in creating the supports as well as removal of them. So this particular configuration was a big no. So now look at the other method of manufacturing the part. So we have reversed it. Despite the fact we reversed it, the support structures, once again, which are shown in the blue color, are almost like 200% compared to the part volume. So some of the problems were reduced by changing the orientation, by getting rid of some of the support structures which are internally present, but still the wastage of the material is significantly higher. So what is that we did was, rather than this baseline configuration with a plate, we started working on connecting each other with the help of the fingers. So this was subjected to re-engineering, and the design of these interconnecting fingers was carefully done that they become self-supporting during the process of powder bed fusion, and hence you do not encounter any support structures which range all the way from the build platform right up to that. So the dimensioning of these features and the inclination of the features corresponding to the build direction was carefully done in a way that it conforms with the principles of design for additive manufacturing. And similar principles were deployed while designing the bosses and determining the sizes of the cutouts in these bosses. So eventually we came out with a configuration wherein you can see the complete absence of the plate on the top. These four parts are joined together with the help of these interlocking fingers, and you can see the bosses which are essential for assembly consideration, and the inclination of all these features, the dimensions of all these features, the dimensions of these geometrical discontinuities, they were all finalized in such a way that we can produce the part with the least amount of material and minimal quantum of support structures. And this particular feature is called self-supporting angle, And that's the reason why you don't get any support related considerations while orienting the part after designing this way. So the reliability of the entire um, reliability of entire process was also improved because of this particular consideration. And the post processing was significantly reduced. And more importantly, the RF performance of the part tremendously improved because of the absence of the welds and other fasteners. So in the textbooks, when you're talking about support structures designed for additive manufacturing, typically you come across the illustrations like this: a coupon which is shown completely horizontal, a coupon which is shown completely vertical, or a 45-degree consideration. Indeed, they are correct, but if you want to really translate all these learnings into real world design for additive manufacturing applications, you need to look at multiple dimensions, including what is the amount of material which you are spending, what is the amount of post processing that you are likely to encounter, whether you are able to realize all the critical features, including the channels, thin walls, and hard to access areas in a proper manner, and how much is the build time, how much is the build height, and these considerations have to be done, while keeping the deformation potentials of the part as well as the heat dissipation challenges in the powder bed fusion. And when you consider all these things, your knowledge of the additive manufacturing as well as DFAM would be able to lead to the industrially relevant applications like the parts that I have shown in this case. This particular slide is a small gallery or a portfolio of some of the additive manufactured parts which you have done in Wipro 3D for the past about 6 to 7 years. You can see some parts are made out of high temperature super alloys, nickel based super alloys like Inconel 7 and 8 HX. Some of the parts like impeller are made out of high specific strength materials like Ti64. There are many parts which have been made for tooling applications, uh, electronic modules, including the antenna structures. And you can also see some parts which are made out of steels for routine applications connected with the housings. If you try and evaluate um, the properties of the parts just by making the coupons in isolation, maybe the insight that you are developing is partially correct. So that's the reason why whenever we are practicing the witness, the manufacturing of witness coupons, we try and position these coupons alongside of the part so that they undergo similar kind of thermomechanical context as the original part. As you know, in the context of laser powder bed fusion, you have tens of thousands of melting and solidification cycles that are happening at heat transfer rates which are in excess of 10 to the power of 5 Kelvin per second. The melt pool dynamics are extremely complex, the which is continuously affected by the inertial forces, gradients in the surface tension, and capillary forces. And if the test coupons do not experience similar thermomechanical phenomena that are experienced by the actual parts, the properties that you extrapolate from the test coupons sometimes may not be representing the performance or the properties of the part. So what I have shown in this case is a hydraulic manifold, which is getting built along with the test coupons at a layer thickness of 80 micron using 17-4 stainless steel. So the problem when you are only relying on a small mass component and trying to translate the properties is explained here. You can see the defect distribution in a small component or a component with a low wall thickness could be radically different from a component which is bulkier, wherein the wall thicknesses could be few tens of times the wall thickness of the test coupon that you are trying to build. This kind of a thing becomes extremely critical when you are trying to make the components for electronics application. What I have shown in this case is a part called ortho mode transducer. It's a waveguide part that we made out of ALSI 10mg for a communication satellite application. The wall thickness in this case ranges from 1.5 to about 3.7 mm. And fundamentally, what does this part do? It combines two orthogonally polarized microwave signal paths, and hence it's also called as a polarization duplexer. So you don't have really access to all the cavities within the part. So in case if there are leftover support structures in these cavities, those support structures are significantly going to impact the RF performance. And it's a possibility that you do not have access to the support structures. So the idea in this case is to build the part using an orientation and using a design wherein you are able to mitigate the support structures to the extent possible. And this is one of the reasons why the NDT is becoming extremely important for acceptance of the additive manufacture parts for industrial application. Whether you are talking about surface level defects or subsurface defects, residual stresses, the leftover elements because of the the process related conditions, um, and the porosities, inclusions. There is a continuous effort by various standardization agencies for developing the NDT methods so that you can get a first-hand insight into the integrity of the part. I'm happy to say that currently you have uh, standards for the general principles and terminology of AM. There are standards which are relevant to data processing and data exchange, GD&T of the parts, and with more and more maturity getting established in the standardization um, scenario, we have even process specific standards now. In case you are handling polymer materials using pod bed fusion, what kind of standards or what kind of procedures you need to follow for improving the quality. There are standards from ASTM. And these standards sometimes are also becoming material specific and application specific. In case the part which is intended to be used is for an offshore application, what are the standards? And in case the part is intended to be used in a spacecraft application, what kind of processes you need to apply? These are getting continuously developed as well as updated. There is always a perennial question. Just give me a second, please. I'll just take a pause to arrange my speaker.
Okay, sir. No issues, sir. No issues.
So there are always perennial questions on which is the process that is most preferred for industrial application. And this particular question has been addressed by several agencies in several modes. And in fact, one of the most cited publication in this case has come from NASA, wherein they have analyzed the processes with reference to ability to replicate complex features, um, the speed of the process, costing, material properties, internal geometries, and availability. So in this case, you can see if you are plotting the process precision of the features, that is the accuracy of the feature on the y-axis and the deposition rate on the x-axis, you can clearly see the emergence of the powder bed fusion as the prime leader. And after that, you have got technologies like laser-wise deposition, and then you have got electron beam deposition slightly behind, because of the fact that though the deposition rates could be far high to the extent of 80 to 90 centimeter per centimeter cube per hour, than the powder bed fusion, which could be just about 15% of that. The feature accuracy in case of electron beam melting is not so good. That's why it lies behind. And in case of arc based deposition techniques, the deposition rates are much higher, but when it comes to the feature definition is far inferior. So that's why you see many technologies getting developed along with relevant materials. But when it comes to industrialization and when it comes to manufacturing readiness, there are only few technologies which are widely prevalent in the product design and development context of the industries. And the most important one is the powder bed fusion in case of metallic materials, and in case of thermoplastic materials, we see polymerization technique as well as the extrusion technique as widely used one. As I mentioned, about 23 to 24 years ago, when these technologies came to India, I'm talking about 98, 99, the initial set of applications were largely confined to design visualization. So let me go back to something which I did about 20 years ago. What you see on the right bottom is the full scale gearbox model. It's actually the housing for accessory drive gearbox used in the light combat aircraft, Tejas. I think many of you would be knowing. And the process for making this particular part is investment casting. I'm talking about the actual part, and the material is magnesium alloy. And from the concept level to realization, it takes anywhere between 16 to 18 months. So the part is shown here on the top left. The linear dimension of the part could be about 700 mm in this direction, and the height could be about 400 mm. The wall thicknesses range from 2 to 4.5 mm. So in this case, we created 1:1 replica of the stereolithography model using those days 3D systems, SLA 5000 system from epoxy resin based photopolymer. And the main idea in this case was design visualization and concurrent engineering. So the moment we made this 1:1 shape model, we circulated to various stakeholders located in Bangalore, like GTRE and Aeronautical Development Agency, Hyderabad, like DMRL, then HAL Koraput, located in Orissa. And when it was given to the foundry technicians, immediately he came back to us, though he was only diploma qualified. Immediately he said that the design of this particular component is not casting friendly, because when you're trying to do the investment casting, we'll not be able to control the flow. Maybe these features will get connected with each other. So we had to redefine some of these bosses because of the information which came from a foundry technician. So this was a classic case of design for additive manufacturing, no, sorry, design for manufacturing, as well as a classic demonstration of the concurrent engineering, wherein the stakeholders from the downstream activities also get connected with the design and development of the part and start giving the feedback. So if you look at contemporary scenario, additive manufacturing is being used in different contexts. Could be for reducing the time to market, or for improving the product performance and functionality, or maybe because of the production efficiencies related to obviating the usage of complex tooling or mass customization possibilities. And in the recent times, you might have seen when the lockdown situations were prevalent, the supply chains were hit hard. So introducing resilience into the supply chain had become very important for all the companies, small, medium, and large companies. So the additive manufacturing enables creation of the distributed manufacturing models. So some of the challenges connected with transportation and distribution could be minimized if you were to set up individual additive manufacturing centers or manufacturing centers employing AIM facilities and producing the parts on demand and delivering them at the point of requirement. So the supply chain benefits are the third set of functional advantages that enterprises are looking up to take decisions with regards to introduction of additive manufacturing into enterprise solutions. So I'll spend some time on explaining the industrial applications of VAT polymerization. I think it's a possibility that some of the preceding speakers have already spoken to you. This is a system on which I worked for about 8 to 10 years, SLA 5000. And fundamentally, in case of polymerization system, you have got a high power laser beam, which is being, the movement of which is being regulated by a pair of orthogonally mounted scanning mirrors, low mass, low inertia mirrors. So the movement of this pair of mirrors is going to translate into the movement of the laser beam on the vat or on the surface of the polymer. So the interaction between this laser energy source and the polymer is going to give rise to immediate solidification of liquid resin. So the advantage of this particular process is you are able to regulate the movement of the laser beams with a great precision. So you can get the parts with excellent surface finish, high dimensional fidelity, through which you can take care of the applications where the part definition, geometrical definition becomes very, very important. Madam, I am in a Teams meeting, in an online meeting. I'll call you in 2 hours time. So some of my applications were connected with aeronautical gas turbine engine. What I have shown in this case is the configuration of a typical turbofan engine, and there are close to 18 to 19,000 parts in a gas turbine engine. Some of the parts like the turbine and nozzle guide vanes operate at temperatures in excess of 2000 Kelvin. The pressures in high pressure compressors could be 20 times more than that of atmospheric pressure. The RPMs could be in excess of 16 to 18,000 RPM. So we make use of different kind of materials, including titanium alloys, nickel alloys, castable alloys, aluminum alloys in the architecture of a gas turbine engine. And what we used stereolithography for was for stress analysis of a component called transmission shaft. You can see the transmission shaft. I think this one is explained. That is the power from the turbine module to the fan module. It's got very low wall thickness, could be anywhere between 2 to 2.5 mm. And if you see, it employs spline joints for connecting these parts. So we had to do the stress analysis of this particular component during the process of design and development. And what we did in this case was create the replicas of both these parts using stereolithography. And you can see the male shaft and female shaft. This is called turbine shaft. This is called fan shaft. We created 1:1 replicas of this shaft assembly using stereolithography. The focus was on the spline joint. As far as the geometrical profile is concerned, a spline joint is very similar to an involute profile, but in case of gear wheels, there is a relative motion, but in this case, it is a stationary joint. So it is subjected to humongous levels of torsional shear stress. So we created a small test rig wherein the components were loaded and subjected to simulated torsional loading conditions. And this entire assembly was subjected to a process called stress freezing by taking into a temperature wherein the material is able to capture the deformation information permanently, and the data is locked up into these components in the form of these colorful fringe pattern, which are called isochromatic fringe patterns. They are not visible to the naked eye. When you keep these parts and see through a polariscope, which is available in every physics laboratory, you can see this colorful fringe pattern. These colorful fringe pattern provide qualitative and quantitative description of the distribution of sigma stress. You can evaluate features like stress concentration factor. You can also understand the regions that are subjected to lower stresses and hence are amenable for design optimization. I'll give simple example through which this aspect becomes very evident. Imagine that you make the 3D printed parts out of photopolymer corresponding to the gear wheels, load them together, subject them to the simulated loading condition and see through the polariscope. You can see the contact stresses here. You can see the bending stresses. Typically, the bending stresses are calculated by the Levy's formula, which you teach in the machine design. And you can also see that in several other places, you have much lower level of stresses, indicating the fact that they become the candidates for material removal. One more example is for the curved beam. You can see the tensile strength stress in the external fiber, compressive stress in the internal fiber, the neutral axis there. Imagine you are trying to demonstrate the principles of the neutral axis, and you are deriving the equations corresponding to these. It becomes extremely handy if you can facilitate this pedagogy by making the representative modules and showing the students on what can be done in terms of understanding the stress distribution through these geometrically representative models. So I found the stereolithography based modeling to be an extremely useful tool in explaining the aspects and functionalities of stress concentration, impact of the cutouts and geometrical discontinuities on the fatigue performance of the components, and more importantly, demonstrating the possibilities of design optimization in such a way that the strength of the part could be kept intact, whereas the weight of the part could be significantly be reduced. The technology which is largely known to the academic community happens to be the fused Gaussian modeling. I'm sure most of the institutions, including close to 10,000 schools in India, have gone for these lower level tabletop 3D printers, wherein you can work with the filaments of ABS or PLA material. Sometimes you may be using this delta configuration. Sometimes you may be using the configuration with which you are very familiar. Or you can also use this robotic arm kind of a configuration, which is connected with a filament supply unit. There are also other variants like a direct extrusion or a Bowden type, depending upon where exactly the extrusion head is located. But incidentally, most of these 3D printers based on the fused filament fabrication principle are available for less than a lakh rupee now. And we see students using them fairly regularly for making different kind of parts. Let me take your attention to one of the case studies that we did in 2003 or 4 for a BTech aeronautical student. He was working on the drone configuration. So rather than using the balsa wood, which happens to be the favorite material for drone practitioners, we worked with Ultem material, and we were able to cut down the weight of this fuselage significantly. Since you do not have since you do not face the penalty of increasing the machining time when the geometrical complexity increases, you can experiment with a lot of design features for while working on new product designs and realize the part. And if possible, you can also use them in functional applications. So one interesting case study which I have done with close to about 2000 students in Bangalore for about 3 years was developing the mechanisms for the uh, flapping wing ornithopter. What do you mean by flapping wing ornithopter? You actually, this is also a drone, but in this case, the wings move up and down, mimicking the birds. And when the frequency of this flapping is about 18 hertz, it develops the necessary lift and thrust, by virtue of which the vehicle becomes airborne and can move forward. And you can integrate a micro cameras into this, and you can illustrate the usage of this particular vehicle for surveillance applications. So the simple experiment that I used to do was I used to ask the students, can you think of a mechanism by which you can translate the rotary motion coming from this small motor into the flapping motion? See, fundamentally, you're looking at the crank mechanism of this. That's about all. So even if you take a rubber band and try to wind, you can power this. But if you want to solve the problem in a more structured manner, you have to think about a gear train, and you can think about the pinions, and you can fix the gear ratio in such a way that you are able to translate the rotary motion coming from the micro motors into the flapping motion of the wings. So when you let the students to think about alternative designs, and also sensitize them to the weight restriction. For example, this particular gear train weighs less than 4.8 grams. The entire vehicle, this drone vehicle, weighs only 23 grams. So how can you make this mechanism in less than 4.8 grams and fit it into the ornithopter and be able to provide necessary integrity that is connected with this application, is something which students can get to learn in early stages if you use this as a powerful example. So you can see here the test flight of this component in which students were involved from aeronautical, mechanical, electronics, and also automobile engineering. We did multiple, you can say skilling oriented sessions for developing two of the ornithopters with the 3D printed parts. And we were able to successfully demonstrate the need and essentiality of novel approach in making these mechanisms for applications of the in the ornithopter. And this was largely facilitated because of the fact that whatever students were able to conceive, we were able to convert them into physical working models by building these small gear trains using low cost 3D printers. And this is something which I did in the year 2005 along with Stratasys, a visualization, assembly integration kind of a project for a gas turbine engine. You can see here a 90-degree cutout. Fundamentally, we created more than 2000 parts corresponding to different modules of the gas turbine engine, assemble them together, and use this replica of the 3D printed replica of the gas turbine engine for explaining the concepts of the air and fuel flow in a gas turbine engine, and importance of the line replacement units, the importance of the airflow components, and what exactly happens when the parts in the primary, secondary, and tertiary load paths fail in terms of creating catastrophe to the entire mission. These are some of the things which we were able to illustrate by making this replica using close to 2000 3D printed parts. But in the bargain, we also developed uh, assembly integrity module for an important component called telemetry system. Fundamentally, what does a telemetry system do is it picks up the signals from various sensors, including strain gauges, thermocouples, pressure sensors, accelerometers that are mounted on various locations in various modules, and processes the data and gives the first-hand information on integrated structural health of the gas turbine engine. So this particular component, the diameter of this component has to be limited to about 70 or 75 mm. The wall thickness is less. There are a lot of electronic components. So the temperatures need to be contained to less than 70 degrees because otherwise the electronics can be affected. So what we did in this case was we created 1:1 replicas of all the parts, assembled them together. Then afterwards, we experimented with different cooling pipe configurations to pick up the cool air from the fan module and transfer the same compressed cool air from fan module and transfer the same and use the same for cooling of the PCBs that are part of this telemetry system. So this was an excellent example of using 3D printed parts and 3D printed assembly for getting first-hand insight into the functionality of the part without violating the space and size considerations. In recent times, this is very important. Many startups as well as socially relevant startups and entrepreneurs in different places in India have started looking at the ways and means of converting the waste plastic or used 3D printed parts, converting them into filaments through affordable uh, extrusion units. These are not similar to the extrusion units which you use in 3D printed. This is the unit wherein the thermoplastic material is melted and the temperatures are precisely controlled, and the liquefied material is squeezed through a die, and the material is converted into a filament, typically with the industry standard of 1.75 mm dia, with the strict control on the roundness and diameter. And this particular exercise leads to a circular economy model. So the waste that you are creating in your experiments can be reused, and you end up spending much lesser uh, money in procuring the materials for your 3D printing related exercises. And there are also instances wherein the parts made out of ABS or polycarbonate have been used as a master patterns in casting procedures. In this specific case, sand casting, to substitute patterns, conventional carpentry patterns, and then give you the castings in materials of your choice. This entire exercise is known as a rapid casting exercise, where our rapid tooling exercise, wherein you are trying to get rid of the TDM associated with the conventional pattern making with the help of an accurate 3D printed part. And you can see here, though the XYZ sizes in case of a typical FFF machine are limited to about 400 mm or 350 mm. The large part of this kind has been made in a modular way, and all these parts are joined together and successfully used as a pattern for casting. It's very pleasing to note that many new generation plastics have been introduced into the extrusion process, including the materials like polyethyramide, which is known as Ultem, polyether ether ketone, peak material, which has got excellence, high temperature properties, goes up to almost like 334 degrees centigrade, biocompatible, remarkable biocompatibility, corrosion resistance, and wear resistance. So you can use the parts which are made out of peak 3D printing for implant applications as well as industrial uses where the wear resistance and corrosion resistance are important. I have also seen in the recent times the emergence of metallic filaments, especially with the materials like SS316. This particular process is called metal filament fabrication process. The extrusion head in this case goes right up to 450 degrees centigrade, and the parts when they are printed, they have a matrix of polymer resin and metal powder. So you need to take the parts through a secondary post-processing cycle to get the adequate density and strength that you expect from a metal 3D printed parts. Now, let me come to the process on which I have spent significant time in the recent months or recent years, the laser powder bed fusion. It's a possibility that the other speakers have spoken to you on this process. Incidentally, what happens is the beam in this case, when it falls on the powder, it undergoes multiple number of reflections, and it's important to note that not all the materials are compatible with the powder bed fusion process. You need to spend a lot of time in understanding the melt pool dynamics. And if you look at the modes of heat transfer, you got all the three modes. You got liquid pool radiation. There is convection, which is caused due to the surface tension gradients. In fact, that phenomena is called Marangoni convection in terms of facilitating or enabling the flow depending upon the gradients in this surface tension. And you got conduction as the main mode of heat transfer. So extremely complex phenomena, and the structures could have very characteristic features, including columnar grains that you generally see. And these columnar grains sometimes go to the extent of few layers in terms of their sizes. But important thing for us to acknowledge is the amount of energy which is infused into the powder has to be controlled in a precise way. If you introduce lesser amount of energy for a given volume, then you may end up with many particles that remain unfused. That is called lack of fusion. On other extreme, imagine that you are introducing too much of energy into the stipulated volume of the material, and the material or the local temperature there is even exceeding the threshold of the boiling temperature. So there is evaporation of the material, and you may start operating in the keyholing mode. In other case, if you are using or if you are deploying very high scan speeds and high power, despite the fact that the material is getting melted, it doesn't get enough time to coalesce and connect with the adjoining melt pools. So what you get is disjointed pools of material which are liquefied and solidified. So these are called individual balls, and the phenomena is called balling phenomena. So whenever you take up a material and try to adapt to powder bed fusion, it's imperative that you spend enough time on optimizing the process parameters through which you can identify this process window wherein the material can be worked on with the close control on the structural integrity. And your effort is to reduce the porosity, surface porosity, subsurface porosity, and also contribute to enhancement of this part strength. It's not that you just can believe in one parameter and employ some empirical relations for ensuring that parameter. For example, the most common terminology is volumetric energy density. So if you take a particular level of volumetric energy density, it can be realized with low laser power or high laser power, low scanning speed or high scanning speed. But in some of the cases, the track morphology is close to ideal. In other cases, you can see the track morphology is nowhere near what is optimally needs to be there. And you can also see here is just by changing one parameter called the laser power from 100 watts to 400 watts, you are quickly getting, or you are getting moving from conduction mode, which is generally associated or characterized by semi-cylindrical shape, melt pools and shallow track depth, to keyhole shaped melt pool with a very deep track depth exceeding few layers. So if you look at the parameters that are affecting the outcome in a powder bed fusion, the parameters could be connected with metal powder itself in terms of particle size distribution, morphology, thermal properties like specific heat, absorptivity, and it could be connected with production processes like laser power, hatch spacing, layer thickness, scan strategy, or it could be something connected with the lasers in terms of the laser parameters. So it's important for you to get a broad picture of all these things and control the process parameters so that you can maintain the operating window at the optimal level. There are many interesting contemporary case studies which are happening on understanding the process physics, and you can get any number of PhD works or postdoctoral works in adapting new materials. And I have seen some of the contemporary research is also connected with using synchrotron. Synchrotron is a very large machine that accelerates electrons to almost the speed of the light. As the electrons are getting deflected through magnetic fields, they create extremely bright light, and this light is channeled down to experimental workstations wherein it is used for finding out what's happening in subsurface levels. So in this case, the research group from UK was able to even illustrate how the modulation of the laser power can create certain voids, and how you can mitigate this porosity by modulating the laser power, especially with the cognizance of the interaction between two adjoining melt tracks. And these are all done with the high-speed imaging systems. I think in this specific case, the imaging was done at about 40,000 frames per second, and you can clearly see the emergence of the voids and disappearance of the voids depending upon how you are modulating the laser power. Important for us to note that the melt pool dynamics are function of capillary forces, surface tension gradients, and inertial effects. And there is a continuous ejection of the powder because of the uh, interaction between the laser beam and powders. And this may be evident in the form of the vapor plume as well as a spatter. And we use pressurized inert gas flows to drive away the spatter. And important thing for understanding the industrial context of the powder bed fusion is we have to do significant amount of iterations when you are working with the new materials, new batches of materials, or completely new compositions. And this may involve making these witness coupons multiple times and trying to understand what happens at the part level in terms of deformation or delamination, or at the macro scale wherein the problems can manifest in the form of the cracks, or at the microstructure level wherein uh, the grain morphology may not be indicative of what you are aiming at. And what we cannot typically see with the regular laboratory infrastructure is also happening at the atomic level in terms of impacting the bond length. So the state of the art research on powder bed fusion is happening in terms of delineating the process structure property correlation. And energy density impacts a microstructure, it impacts a grain size, it impacts a porosity, and hence the mechanical properties. Mechanical properties are the ones which you can readily test in a laboratory scenario in the form of a tensile strength, or elongation at break, or flexural strength, or impact strength, or resilience, or wear resistance. So these properties can be measured with some of the standard equipment which are available in the laboratories, but important for you to understand the correlation among the process structure and properties. It's not only the process related parameters that you need to study. Even in the post processing, you can use multiple processes including short peening, ultrasonic impact treatment, surface mechanical attrition treatment, uh, polishing, grinding, to improve the surface quality. And all these things need to be modified depending upon the material that you are working on, and depending upon the application you are hinting to fulfill. So as I mentioned, we have had an opportunity to work with the superalloys, stainless steel materials, aluminiums in the recent times, with the titaniums and other refractory materials. And just to illustrate, we recently adapted a new material for the additive manufacturing context called high temperature resistant steel A286. In this case, we were trying to create the spare part as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharata, rather than depending on the French sources for the Artust engine of the Chetak helicopter. We developed this component called inner ring from A286. The component development took maybe about 3 to 4 months, but we had to evaluate the high temperature properties corresponding to the strength, yield, elongation, ductility, and fatigue. And this part took significant amount of time because we need to guarantee the performance of the part by doing multiple tests. So if you really look at the test properties that have been generated during past 5 to 6 years in our lab. Typically, the test properties indicate that the properties are much superior to those what you get from casting as the manufacturing option. But when you compare the same with forged parts, especially in terms of the ductility or elongation at break, maybe it is slightly on the inferior side. And you need to assure achievement of all these things through your post-processing or heat treatment uh, um, related practices. So in a large engineering conglomerate, could be from aeronautics or could be from space research, initially additive manufacturing is introduced in the category 0 and 1 components, wherein even if the 3D printed parts were to fail, the consequences are minimal because these parts happen to be in the secondary and tertiary load paths. So even if they were to fail, the consequences are minimal. But as the confidence grows, you start building the components which need to operate at high temperatures, high mechanical loads, under high centrifugal loads, using super alloys, and you do extensive testing of the parts to gain confidence that these parts can substitute conventionally manufactured parts. But in recent times, we have seen that there are efforts in terms of adapting design for additive manufacturing so that you can take advantage of additive manufacturing as a part of the design effort. So this is called additive design approach. And in this case, the tendency on the part of the designers and developers is to take advantage of the possibility of monolithizing, weight reduction, integration of multiple functional features into the part through the usage of the additive manufacturing processes in the development cycles. There are quality management practices that you need to adhere. So we at Wipro have been integrating the quality practices connected with the AS 9100, Lloyd's, NADCAP, etc. into our protocols. In the recent times, we have seen that there are several growth vectors that have contributed to enlarging of the additive manufacturing business. For the year 2020, it is estimated that the overall business size is about 11 billion US dollars in 3D printing, with about 35% being contributed by metallic materials, remaining 65% coming from polymer materials. But what I have seen in the recent times is there is an proclivity towards making multiple parts in the single build. As you can see here, the automotive headlight heat sink, 384 numbers have been created in a single build. And this is the kind of industrialization which is happening in the world of additive manufacturing to create a very potential model of looking at additive manufacturing as a substitute for conventional routes. We at Wipro do not only look at the process in isolation, the build technology, whether you're talking about powder bed fusion or binder jetting technology, it's only maybe 20% of the overall scenario. You need to look at the design context. We need to look at the post-processing, research on materials, testing, qualification, and certification. Then only the parts of this kind can go for fulfilling the needs on the field. We made dozens of parts like impellers, valves for oil and gas sector. In these cases, special facilities are created for testing the additive manufactured parts and understanding whether you can substitute the conventionally manufactured parts with the additive manufactured parts without having any anxiety related to premature failure of the part. We also worked very closely with the research team of IISc to develop India's first ever indigenous electron beam additive manufacturing system. The idea in this case is to work with refractory materials like tantalum, vanadium, tungsten, etc., and also to work with biocompatible materials like Ti64 for medical context. So I need to really rush now. I'll conclude my presentation in 5 minutes and leave the platform open for discussions afterwards. Is it okay, Dr. Chari?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's okay, sir.
Okay. So since April 2000, in the year in the month of April in 2020, responding to the call of the government of India, we got into the design and development of an emergency breath um, assistive system, also called as mechanical ventilator for non-intubated situation. And I will quickly indicate, say, how we use 3D printing as the enabler for product design and development. In this case, we worked very closely with the Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute of Medical Science and Technology as our partner. So fundamentally, when you are looking at the ventilator, there are parameters like tidal volume, peak expiratory pressure, controlling depending upon the pressure or volume, the amount of oxygen it has to deliver. And if you look at the overall context, the inspiratory circuits, expiratory circuits are very important. Part of it is happening through external assistive system. Remaining thing is happening in a voluntary level. So what you see in this case is the basic mechanism, the Viper mechanism, which we took from an automotive context, and we built the entire. Imagine in April 2020 when the country was experiencing severe lockdown implications, the supply chains were completely disrupted. So we had to look at this configuration and the development in that kind of a scenario. As you can see here, there is a lever which is responsible for compressing the silicon resuscitator bag at periodic frequency to displace enough amount of gas. And there are electronics there is a back support mechanism, there is chamber, clasp, and we had to do real industrial engineering of the part to make sure that not only the ventilator functions okay, but it has to look okay, convey the working principles to the people like healthcare workers, pulmonologists, intensivists. So we had many occasions wherein we carried out design iterations in the part in quick way to reduce the size, weight without compromising on the functionality. And some of these things are shown here. These parts were made on a binder jetting system. And then we also developed some of the modules connected with bought out items like masks and even simple features like this clasping mechanism to the belt. What we assumed to be something which is known was not really known. So we had to iterate on several features using these 3D printed parts. And I'll skip this thing by just concluding that one of the very important case studies which I will talk for about 5 minutes is on the steering knuckle and upright. This is an important part of the car. Those of you who worked on the e-vehicles, it holds the hub, wheel hub, and allows the rotation of the wheel. And the brake calipers are also mounted on this steering knuckle, and it actually transmits the forces from the tire contact patch to the suspension. So we worked with a bunch of students from IIT Bombay and VIT Vellore for design optimization, employed the principles of topology optimization, looked at the ways and means of minimizing the support structures, and then build this part on a powder bed fusion, and were able to illustrate what exactly are the functional advantage of an additive manufactured part compared to the conventionally manufactured part in terms of cutting down the weight while leaving no room for complacency as far as the strength and stiffness are considered. So the weight reduction was done to the extent of almost like 35% in this case. And in the bargain, sorry, 25% in this case. And in the bargain, the design became extremely efficient. And I see that similar practices are also emanating in the real world automotive scenario, wherein there is so much of focus on looking at components like brake caliper being made through powder bed fusion and being tested. So with that, I'll stop the presentation. All that I was trying to illustrate is these parts can be used for real world applications, and there is a lot of scope for doing research on material side, process side, post processing, and design side. And for next about 4 to 5 minutes, I'll be happy to take any questions from the participants. Thank you so much.
Sir,
Yeah,
here in the chat box, 2 questions are there, sir. Can I read?
yeah, sure.
Sir, any information regarding electrochemical 3D printing?
No, I have not worked on the electrochemical 3D printing.
Okay. What is the percentage of joining efficiency in bonding as layer with respect to mechanical properties?
We have been able to ensure density levels of almost like 99.9% in some cases, and ultimate tensile strength, which is almost comparable to forged part. So this happens not only through processing, but also it happens through post-processing, heat treatment. So the overall part, if you are talking about a isolated parameter called joint efficiency, number one is we can do away with the joints because of the fact that we can combine multiple parts into single part. But if at all you maintain separate joints, you can also ensure that the strength is as good as the original context of forged parts and joined together.
So next, sir, next question. The deformation of pattern of the layers on the surface of the material under considering against load with respect to parameters such as strain, stress, temperature.
I couldn't understand the question properly, but
just 1 minute, sir.
I think it's about.
Yeah, sir. Crispo, sir, can you ask directly to the speaker?
No. I will answer it. Don't worry, Dr. Chari.
Okay.
There are distortions which are associated with severe thermal gradients that are associated with the powder bed fusion, and depending upon the bulk of the material, size of the component, they could be significant. And sometimes these distortions manifest in form of residual stresses. So it's important that you understand the implications corresponding to powder, process, and laser parameters, and assess them with the help of the witness coupons that are built alongside of the actual parts. That's how we assess them.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So these are the questions asked by me, Dr. Chari, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So next question, sir. Next question, sir. What about the surface roughness for impeller inside the flow passage of impeller?
Yeah. So important thing is you design the features in such a way through the principles of additive manufacturing, additive engineering, that you don't get surface support structures there. If you don't have support structures there, then you can assure excellent surface quality. In case you have support structures, it goes without saying that you have to use processes like abrasive flow machining to ensure the surface quality.
How it can be measured and improved, sir?
Measuring is through your regular principles of industrial metrology. TaliSurf is one of the common components. Improvement is possible through any one of the processes like ultrasonic impact treatment, short peening, micro peening, grinding, and surface mechanical attrition treatment.
So one more question, sir. Is there any standard for impeller manufacturing through 3D printing?
There is no standard corresponding to impeller alone, but there are standards corresponding to making of components of similar kind for offshore applications.
Okay, any questions from the audience? You can directly unmute yourself and ask to the speaker. Any questions, any query from the participants? Directly, you can unmute yourself and ask to the speaker.
I think all the questions are taken care, Dr. Shari. I
Okay,
see
sir.
the similar questions.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Dr. Shari. It was
Yeah,
pleasure
yeah.
connecting with you and all the participants. Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
so much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for accepting our invitation, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Today afternoon, one online practice session is there on the 3D printing software and STL file generation. I have forwarded the instructions for the installation of the softwares. Please try to install the softwares in your laptop and desktop. Then you can practice in the online practice session. First of 1 hour, I will give the demo, how to do the STL file generation, how to do the orientation, how to do the how to do work in the 3D printing software. So the next 1 hour, we are going to do the practice session. So already instructions are given. Instructions PDF files are forwarded to your email. Please check and install your softwares in your laptop and desktop. Thank you. Thanks for your cooperation. Thanking you. Now I'm closing this session. Already feedback form is there in the chat box. Please fill the feedback form.